In the 1988 Summer Olympics, Team USA, after coming off a stellar gold medal rout in 1984, finished the men's basketball Olympic tournament with a bronze medal after losing to the Soviet Union in the semifinal. Given the US-Soviet Union political conflict at that time, this was seen as an embarrassment to USA basketball, who up until that point had never missed the Olympic finals. In 1980, the US boycotted the Olympics because of the fact that it was held in the Soviet Union and didn't participate as a result. And prior to that, in 1972, the US lost to the Soviet Union in the gold medal game and finished with silver, ending a 7-straight Olympic streak where the Americans walked away with the gold. Between 1936 and 1984, Team USA walked away with the gold medal in every Olympics they participated in, with the exception of one silver. Thus, finishing with the bronze in 1988 was unacceptable. And the Americans pushed hard for a rule change in allowing their professional athletes, guys who were in the NBA, to be able to participate in representing USA basketball on an international stage. Prior to that, it was mainly college athletes and some of the better amateurs and semi-pro players in the US that would compile the roster. The United States case was that teams like the Soviet Union were using full-time paid athletes to train for the Olympics to represent their team. And with international basketball becoming increasingly more competitive, Americans wanted the same level playing field to be able to send their best of the best in basketball for international play. And sure enough, in 1989, FIBA approved the rule that allowed NBA players to compete in international tournaments, which included the Olympics. The following Olympics in 1992, the US put together a roster that would later be known as the Dream Team, and most would argue was the greatest basketball team ever assembled, with the likes of Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Scottie Pippen, Chris Mullin, the list goes on. And the US dominated with an average margin of victory of 44 points per game on the way to the gold medal. Safe to say, this wasn't even a contest, and it was a message that the US wanted to be back at the top of international basketball with no one stepping in their way. And while the US would go on to finish with the gold in the next 6 out of 7 Olympic runs, it had become increasingly more clear just how competitive international basketball had become, and not a surefire thing where the Americans would always finish out on top. Some of the best players in the NBA right now have come from overseas: Nikola Jokic, Giannis, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic. As head coach of the USA FIBA World Cup team, Steve Kerr said recently, these aren't easy games. FIBA basketball has changed, and the international players take the game very seriously when they go out and represent their country. And while this is 100% true, and we can only imagine that as basketball continues to increase in global popularity, the talent pool among nations is going to rival that of the US. Long gone are the days of American dominance in international basketball play. But just like we have seen in years past, after the US lost in the Olympics in 1988 and then again in 2004, the subsequent teams that followed that let everyone know that the US wasn't messing around and taking this more seriously. And after 2 most recent embarrassments in the last 2 FIBA World Cups, in which USA failed to even medal in both of those, that will 100% be the case as the team prepares to assemble their Olympic roster for next summer in Paris in 2024. What will that look like? How good can they be relative to their competition around the world? Well, that's what we'll be talking about in this video. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, it would mean a great deal to me if you subscribe to help the channel grow, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, while I think most feel the FIBA World Cup isn't really that important as it relates to international success on a global stage, say compared to the Olympics, which this has even been said by some of the players themselves, with the likes of Jimmy Butler saying he doesn't really care about the World Cup, the fact of the matter is, the rest of the world does take this seriously and places a high importance on it. The FIBA World Cup was the most watched FIBA World Cup since its days back when it was called the FIBA World Championship, shattering the last record ratings from the World Cup in 2019. Every year, the tournament becomes more and more popular with greater viewership. And while I'm sure some Americans will say, whatever, who cares, it is just the World Cup, it kind of stings when the US, the country that founded basketball and has the top athletes in the world, went without a medal in the last 2 World Cups, with the global audience continuing to get wider and wider. And of course, the memes, the Twitter troll accounts going in on Team USA for losing yet again, and especially losing to Canada in the 3rd place game, a team that has never medaled in World Cup or Olympics history, is the salt to rub in the wound that makes it a little more painful. Safe to say, if the US is not going to take this seriously, they're going to continue to get run down by their competition as the sport gains more and more global popularity, which I think we all know based on what has been done in the past, the US won't allow for that to happen again. You see, after the 92 Dream Team, in which USA made it look like they were a varsity squad going up against a 7th grade C team every night, to make the tournament a little more competitive, the US started dialing it back year after year. Still sending some of their best players, but generally guys who were younger, up-and-coming stars, as well as some role players to round out the roster, which has enabled games to be much more close with the increasing talent of foreign players and the NBA not simply sending every superstar from their league. But as we start to see this shift in international players being some of the best in the NBA, the US has struggled a bit when it comes to keeping up with the pace and defensive vigor of international teams, and obviously the various rule changes between FIBA basketball and the NBA. Team USA in the Tokyo Olympics, while they won the gold medal, people forget there was a moment where it looked like the US was going to struggle to come out of the group stage, and then also going toe-to-toe with Spain in the quarterfinal before the US broke away in the final 6 minutes. It would have been the first time in Olympic history that the US would not have medaled since men's basketball became an event in the Olympics in 1936. And then, of course, more recently, losing out on winning a gold medal in the World Cup has put the US on notice. Here's the thing. The problem with the most recent World Cup roster and the players that were selected to represent the US was that, one, none of them were what most would consider to be superstars in the NBA. Sure, a couple of them might be on their way to getting there, like Tyrese Halliburton and Anthony Edwards, but those two, along with Jaren Jackson Jr., were the only all-stars on that roster. And you look across the rest of this group, and while sure, it's a talented bunch, they're all young, relatively inexperienced, and lack leadership and veteran savviness. Jalen Brunson and Bobby Portis were the two oldest players on that roster. Walker Kessler, a guy coming off his rookie season, was the starting center in the third place game against Canada. Austin Reaves was getting some of the most minutes on that team. Cam Johnson, why is Cam Johnson of all people on Team USA basketball? If the rest of the countries in the world are going to be sending out their best of the best to represent their team, why shouldn't the US be doing the same thing? And don't get me wrong, I love the fact that we're seeing so much talent springing up across the world. I love that international basketball has become increasingly more competitive. But for the USA, you can't be putting out that kind of product with the level of superstars you have at your disposal. I get that some of the older guys are not going to want to compete in the World Cup or the Olympics like LeBron James, Kevin Durant, or even Steph Curry. They've done it before. They don't want to risk themselves getting injured when going into the regular season. But I fully expect that come the Olympics next summer, the US isn't going to mess around. And they're going to look to secure the best players in the league. I'm talking about guys like Jason Tatum, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Trae Young, De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown, and hey, these are some of the younger guys because I'm mainly assuming the older vets aren't going to want to participate. But the US should be doing everything in their power to convince some of these superstar vets to help lead this team. Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis, if the last two can stay healthy. Hell, even Damian Lillard again, who was there in Tokyo. Jimmy Butler, Bradley Beal, DeMar DeRozan. Like, when you really think about the talent pool among American players, it's insane, especially if you throw in some of the high-level role players that are always going to be needed in international play. So, like in 1992 and again in 2008, I fully anticipate Team USA to try and reclaim their dominance on the global stage and put out the best roster possible, not only for this upcoming Olympics in Paris, but going forward as we see other countries becoming better and better and fighting for their own dominance in the game of basketball. Let me know what you guys think though. Do you think this will be the case going into the Paris Olympics this summer? Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.